Alrighty, traders, welcome back. It is March 1st. We are doing the February recap as always. Bit of a time crunch today, so I'm going to try to get in everything I want to talk about today. If you finished or watched the very end of January's recap, I mentioned that this would be the last time you see this background or this office because I am moving. I lied. I'm moving practically the next 3 or 4 days. I have time this morning to make a video, and I'd rather do it now than in a week or two once I'm finally settled in for moving. So I'm going to grind this out, get this out of the way here, and move on with my hectic life that is moving, which is never fun. So without further ado, February, just under 100 grand. In fact, I was over 100 grand, but I had discovered some, at the end of the month, I always do my overnight borrow fees. Ended up being quite higher than I expected. So it brought me down under 100K, but that's all right. Still a very good month P&L wise. However, trading wise, there are a few frustrations, and we'll go through them. And only because I just feel like it didn't trade that well, right? Obviously, I traded good enough, clearly, just from a P&L's perspective. Clearly, I did something right. But there's just a few things in here in this month that really bug me, because if I didn't have those things in there, trading better or trading well would have led to more P&L, just from a point system or a score, so to speak. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Let's get right to it. So week number 1, and really this was the biggest gain. So the day on March 3rd, and the gain you see right here was from TNXP. So TNXP here, as this was bouncing for 5 days or so, it was getting into what was the resistance from the previous bounce. Now, again, they did a reverse split. So this was never at 120 or 70. This was always under $1 in these bounce ranges. And so once we were bouncing and we kind of pulled back this day, I thought to myself, hey, that's the time to maybe get short and start swinging this for a fade back to lows. Now, I got lucky because they announced the reverse split, and when they announced it, obviously it gapped down, well over or approaching 50%, and that was really the entire gain there. If we just look at the trades, this day right here, so let me make this bigger. This crack was this day right here, right? And I can't go back far enough, but that little wick off the top was this pull. And so when we bounced, I started getting short. I started starting in. Had some arrows here, but this was very, very small. This was the real size I put on. That's why you don't see me cut anything, because I was willing to risk, well upward towards of 70 cents. So we weren't even getting close there on these ads or these starters. But then added with the risk on highs. And then if you look at the next day here, adding some more when I think we're weak. By late day, then we roll over, which is great. Held it for one more day. Or actually 2 more days, right? They're here, held here, and then a little small bounce green day. But again, my risk is still up towards that 58, 60 cent level. And then the next morning, they announced a reverse split to start my February. Right? It was February 1st, 2nd, 3rd, February 3rd to start the month. And if we go to the chart, gap down massively. Right, closed at 43. I covered by 24, 25. And even then, I could have got sub 20 if I was a little more patient. Even more so than that, I could have gotten, by the time the reverse split actually went through, I could have gotten, 15 cents, 20 cents. Now reverse split adjusted, this is 7 cents, right? So quite obliteration. But again, that's not the first time this company's done this. They've done numerous reverse splits, right? This was never at 1200. They just done reverse split after reverse split after reverse split. So, that was the big gain. 50K, just under 50K, 49 and change. So that was a great start to the month. But as you can see, that's really as good as it got. Everything else after that was more added onto the bottom line, obviously. But that was the biggest gain for sure. So next up is a loser. I think it was somewhere in here on the first week, on Fannie Mae. So Fannie Mae was a really big contributor to the gains in January. Not so much in February. Honestly, just because there's no real huge wins or huge moves, so to speak, in comparison. But on this little breakdown, you actually see this right here. The low here is 506. I was looking for a $5 breakdown, only because, again, this is still a pretty big run. It could easily have broken 5 and made its way back down to 4 or 450, right? I thought there was room for this to kind of pull back and start consolidating more towards where this run really got off and took off. So I did get short. Let me go into that day. February 3rd. So I guess it was the Monday. Was it really this day? I don't remember it being this day. But you see here, it broke 5 in the morning, and you'd think like I wouldn't have lost much, but I lost 10K here. And although I'm okay losing that much, it's how I lost it that really bugs me. Let's get rid of this one here. Breakdown. I'm just kind of shorting, covering, really for no reason. Now, obviously, I had the feeling that, hey, it wasn't working. Like, this should not have just broken 5 and then ricocheted right back and then actually held the rest of the day. That certainly was a bullish look, and so it made me uncomfortable, which is why I never really stuck to my risk. Really, my risk was way up here at 5K or 550, but instead of just shorting it once and holding to that risk and losing 10K up there, or like I think it was more like 8 or 9K. Instead, I'm just like covering once, reshorting, covering again, shorting again, covering again, to lead to 3 losers that led and added up to 10K. Just chopped myself up in really no man's land when no decision had to be made here. Now, obviously, by a late day, I would have either chosen to swing or just get rid of it. And ultimately, right, you see the daily chart. It came right back the next day. So I would have certainly covered it the next day had I held. And then that led to the movement that we got, the rest of the month, right? It was actually a very strong support hold, kind of a fake out breakdown. And so lost 10K there. Kind of annoying, kind of whatever, but it would have been lost no matter how I played it. It's just the fact that I couldn't stick to a plan and was just like back in and out, more times than it should have required or needed. So that's the other one. So another chart that we don't have because they did their merger, and I just can't seem to get a chart of the newer ticker, is MGOL. So I wish I could show you what we were dealing with because it would have been a better idea. But this is one of those trades where I was up plenty, and then I proceed to just want to be greedy, and I'm like, Kyle, what are you doing? To describe the daily chart, this was running from, I think it was like 10 or 20 cents, and then in over 2 or 3 days, it was now into the 40s, and so I thought to myself, hey, this is gapping up huge. It's going to be hard for it to hold this gap. It should sell off, and I was correct, right? I got short a little bit early. I think it was a small green candle downsizing or recovering, and then immediately reshorted, and it pulled, from the 40s now sub 30. Yes, did I have a greedy thought in my mind that, hey, like this might go to 20 today? Totally. But was it also part of my trade plan that, hey, the moment you see anywhere close to 30 or lower, like you should be taking something off, right? I don't care if it's a fourth, it's a half, like cover something. And so, of course, the thoughts of greed or the thoughts of, hey, this might go lower overtook that. And so I don't cover a single thing. It was like a mental battle I was having, and it was just silly. Like it just follow the damn trade plan and hit the button, cover button, Kyle, right? Didn't do that. And also maybe it was more of justification of like, okay, it's going to bounce, but hey, late day, it could offer a fade. Unfortunately, the thoughts of what if it doesn't fade didn't pop in my head. And so when this chopped around a little bit longer than I wanted, I covered, I think maybe a fourth here. I was like, okay, let's just downsize just in case it doesn't. And of course it does not fade and it goes higher. And then I cover the rest for what was a, 5-figure winner into a 10K loser. Okay. And that's with covering this. So if I held the full size over high day, it would have been probably, 12, 13, maybe even a 15K loser. So annoying because again, to be up that much and to pretty much do a full 180, it's just unnecessary, right? It's just silly. And it went again much higher. So I'm obviously glad I cut it where I did. And I did follow the trade plan in that regard. But it's never fun giving back gains when you should have covered and your own greed helped you not. So now that's the end of, I think, the trades for this week, so to speak. This day is my biggest red day of the month, and partly because my biggest losing trade of the month was this day on my birthday. Gotta love it. On also MGOL. And so the next day it gapped up massively, right? It had that run into the 50 cents, pulled back or whatever, but that was not the end of that run. Gapped up even bigger the next day. And so I thought to myself, okay, the same idea, same trade plan. Hopefully this time it actually fades and it doesn't hold up. That was wrong. Same idea. It's almost an identical trade, but unfortunately a little bit bigger size and a second attempt that was maybe bigger than I wanted. So got short, covered, got short again. again, went to new low day. So I was like, hey, this is working. This is good. And yeah, again, that fear of like, hey, this could bounce and come back was there, obviously, like the first day. But again, I thought just this was even a much bigger gap. It was much more extended now. This should have a little bit more pull than the prior days. And if it doesn't have more pull, it will still have a bounce that I could get out into the bounce if it does end up bouncing. Of course, it offers something completely different. It offers just a straight up spike, right? I mean, in 2 seconds, or not 2 seconds, 2 minutes, you're back from 56 to 66, and then it consolidates for 5-10 minutes, and you're immediately then from 66 up into the 70s to new high day. So, again, I followed my trade plan, but my gosh, was this just an annoying ticker? And so I lost, over 30 grand on this one. Pretty much 2 attempts of 16K each, so to speak, which I'm okay with that. But again, it's how it happened. This just was a very annoying ticker in the way it moved. And the problem is, and why maybe I'm annoyed, is that like I kind of knew that. Like, this isn't my first time trading MGOL. I already had that baked in, and why I didn't listen to that or listen to those characteristics about this stock that I was very well aware of, I couldn't tell you. Call it greed, call it just ignorance, call it being lazy and not listening to that voice in my head. But yeah, so frustrating. But yeah, and also actually first biggest loss of the year. Remember, if you watched my January recap, one of the keys to success here was just how little of losses I took. I took, I think, like 8 or 9 losses all of January. I think I took 8 or 9 losses in February by like week 1 or week 2. Like the first 2 weeks, I was already well over above that. So I think in total for all of February, I took like 20 something losses. So well over double, if not are pushing triple of January. So very different month in that regard. But yeah, so that was MGOL. But what was the savior to then actually bringing me back green on the week was 2 bigger winners from AIFF and TIVC. Both of this pretty much the same setup that actually happened on the same overnight kind of trade. And so AIFF, very happy with how I traded this because I literally did not touch this at all day 1, at all day 2. And it wasn't until day 3 that I even thought about it. And the only way I was considering it was an overnight idea. I didn't want to touch it intraday. I didn't care. It was like, hey, if this just closes weak or it isn't as strong as day 1 or 2, I think this is overdone enough. This is certainly extended enough from 3 to 16 that like there's just going to be a pullback. And so I'm very happy with how I traded it. The only downside to this is that the overnight trade had me paying overnight interest, which normally is fine 99% of the time, and I'm okay with that. Except the overnight interest on this one was insanely high. I thought I did my math correctly on how much it would have been. But in essence, I paid $9K to hold it overnight. So half of my borrow fees, or just fees, right? I know I call it borrow fees, but it's borrow fees and overnight interest. Half of that, $18K, was just holding it overnight once. When in reality, I could have just woken up super early, gotten short at the same exact price, and then caught the same move. So again, it's hindsight. I didn't know it was going to open up here. Obviously, I was overthinking overnight because I thought there was an idea, a potentiality it would just open up pre-market much, much lower. Or it would have faded in after hours and then it would have opened up where it closed in after hours kind of idea. Obviously didn't do that. Could have argued maybe just covered in after hours before having to pay the overnight fee. But it is what it is. Again, paying the fee sucked, but again, I made 25K on this short. So technically it was worth it. If we go into the actual trades here, this is me getting short, right? Started in here, one more add into this push. It's funny. This is one of those times where I changed my trade plan mid-trade, but I did it for the better, right? And I say that with a grain of salt because some traders will change their trade plan, and it's the reason why they blow up or let a loser run towards 2x longer than it should have. As I got short here, and I said, hey, I should be risking from a risk reward standpoint that feels good. I was like, I should be risking this double top. But when this kept going in this spike, I knew deep down the high of day at like 17 up here out the open was the true risk level that mattered, right? Because if my whole thesis was to hold it overnight, the only price level that really matters to not holding it overnight would be high of day. And so last second I said, no, I can accept the risk. Maybe the risk reward isn't as big as I like, but I can accept, risking a couple grand more, a few grand more to give me the best chance of it succeeding. And I'm so glad I did because what do you know? It wicks by a penny or two over these highs and then just fails, right? I would have been even more tilted had I actually covered, only to see it fail and then know deep down like, hey, this was the real level and you just were lazy and not wanting to pick that. So I'm glad I changed it last second, but again, it's not every day I'm doing that. In fact, most times you do that, I would say is a bad time. I see a lot of beginning traders will be like, we're risking high day, and then it breaks high day, and they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to risk 20. It's like, no, you're going downhill. You're downward spiraling. So a little bit of a caveat there, grain of salt. But again, after hours wasn't as weak as I liked, like I mentioned, but it was the weakest after hours of them all, right? All of these after hours previously had grinded up pretty well, like well over $1 a share or so. This after hours was pretty sideways when you look at it. And so I think that was what gave me enough conviction to say, hey, okay, this is good. Let's hold it overnight. And yeah, next morning, beautiful fade. There's no way I would have gotten short out the open had I not shorted it overnight. It would have had to been, like I said, early pre-market or not at all, because this was quite a huge gap down, and then immediate flush out the open, and I covered it for a 25K win there. And even then, still went lower, and then again, even further than that, if you really wanted to hold it longer, which really wouldn't have made sense given with the how expensive the overnight interest was. But what do you know? It's right back down to where it started. So insane backside. But I'm happy I caught, obviously the easiest part of the move, which was the biggest first red day. Now, TIVC, same idea. Again, different tickers, totally different, unrelated runs, but same idea. Runs from 24 cents up to 70. Huge move. Gaps up even bigger. And so I thought to myself, hey, if this can't, get going over those highs, these highs, because it's kind of like a shortened resistance play for some people, even though I don't play them that way or I'm really a fan of that setup. It did add, factors to this trade. And I think they also had warrants at like 85 cents, 86 cents. So clearly there was enough indicators for me, given the extension, given the gap up, given the things I just mentioned, that like, hey, the somewhere in the 80s, 90s, it's going to have a very difficult time. And so I get short. If we go to the trades, let's get rid of that. Right here, boom. Right, when it spikes, I get short small. I think on this spike, I'm like risking $1. But then once it starts really full on stuffing, I'm adding and getting full size. I guess this was one more aggressive add. Covered a piece into the low 60s. But again, I was pretty confident that I was like, hey, this could go to below 60 today. So I was willing to hold. Obviously, it came back, and so I added what I covered back here, and because it only closed slightly green, but clearly, I think the beginning of backside, given it stuffed super hard, given the resistance, given the warrants, like I just mentioned, same idea, kind of with AIFF, where I'm like, hey, this is a good look for a possible gap down the next day. And that's what it did. Even after it was already cracking and give you like in a liquid bounce back, but still a indication of a gap down. And next morning, got even more liquid. I mean, you can see on the volume here, TIVC, right? It went from 80 million shares traded to 8. So a casual 90% decrease in volume. That's why I got super liquid, super barcodey is what I like to call it, right? Not much movement, more just like wide spreads. And so I did cover it all, in between like 57, 58, and 60. Locked in 27K there. Mainly, I think what really helped it was that add back, right? This, again, we'll go back into it. This, the covers at 62, 63 cents or whatever it was, and then the add back into, the 80 spike here, helped a lot on that gain being maybe bigger than I originally intended or would have thought it would have been. So very nice. So then that put me over 50K on the day on the 14th here, but then I lost 10K on GTAI here. Little gap and crap, thought it was going to fail. It kind of did. I mean, it did wick off the highs. I just had a poor entry, right? If we look into it, got short what I thought was the new low day move. Turns out total fake out. 5-10 minutes later, immediately squeezing, and I get stopped out. And even if I didn't stop out, let's say I just kept an insanely wide risk level that wouldn't have made sense risk reward wise, it still only pulled back to where I would have gotten short. So the key was obviously avoiding this, which is hard to do, but sometimes it happens for me, and then getting short on what maybe would have been somewhere in here, and you catch the fade there. But didn't happen, so lost some money, gave some money back, but either way, helped me recoup the MGOL losses, and then came back green on the week. Moving on. So then this is where things get annoying, right? I know I mentioned MGL being annoying and being greedy and giving back gains, but these two last weeks in particular is where the real frustration I think started to surface. And two trades specifically were on SMCI here. And it honestly, it's funny. I had two MGOL trades and then two SMCI trades where it's like I was up and then I pretty much gave it all back. First one on the top day of 219. Okay. Let's go into that day. Come on, let's load. Here we go. In the morning, right? Stuffs or spikes, and then a huge, huge washout. And again, I'm thinking, like if we just look at my trades, I did get short for that. Covered a little bit into red-green, which I'm happy about, because I knew, like, if this goes to red-green, you should probably cover. But I also thought, great, I'm then also going to add back on a bounce, and there's going to be another pull to red-green or a higher low, or just some kind of pull. Maybe even it got ugly going low, to even lower than low day, in hindsight. But it didn't offer that at all, right? I added back, and that was like literally the last time you would see those prices. Pretty much gives me like a slight double top, holds, and then rips to new high day. So again, another scenario where I was up well over 5 figures, and then I end up losing actually 13K on this one. So it's annoying because I know I should cover it all here, but again, and maybe the theme of me being frustrated is like, I just had this ever growing sense of greed of like, maybe I can go further. Maybe I can get more out of it. And, 90% of these trades, like I'm going to be covering red green. The ones that gap up huge, right? The ones that have on a huge run, but are on a huge gap to where, I guess maybe that's why, because it wasn't that big of a gap, where it could have easily sold off to into the sub 55 area. I guess I could argue that. But it is what it is. I can't really tell you. It would have been different, like I said, if I didn't cover anything like MGL. But I can't say I wasn't aware, because I did cover some. It's just the add back and then how strong the bounce was. It just didn't give me really a fighting chance, right? My trade plan was off from the start on post 10 a.m. right, and then it was going higher, so I was like, wow, this is going to be really good. Like have this close, 65, 66, have it gap up to 70, and then it's going to give us the real awesome flush. And it does it not afterwards. It does in late day. And this is my least favorite kind of move. I will miss almost every single move this happens late day. It's just not predictable for me in many, many ways. Try shorting it again. I'm like, no, just cover it and just move on. Give it a shot the next day. Start the next day fresh, right? No, don't have a position overnight and just show up clean slate. And so I did that. Got short pre-market. It pulled. I'm very happy. I mean, these I couldn't ask for better entries, right? In terms of just using red green or a little bit higher. I think it was using more like 61 as risk. Got the pull I wanted, or I should say mostly wanted. I was thinking it could go a little bit lower. Again, the curse of this February was me is thinking it always can go a little lower. And again, worse than last time. Again, I don't cover anything this time. Not even a partial cover, not even thinking about covering. I'm like, this is going to see 53, 52, maybe even 50. So I cover nothing. I then add more here. Because the risk reward's really tight. And then I cover it for a 7K loser. So smaller loser than last time, which is good. But again, it's like, what am I doing? Like, why am I not covering any here? And again, this is where I'm frustrated because, again, would I have covered all of it? No. I would have at most been half size, most likely a quarter, and I would have 100% had more size sitting on, the 53s, 52s area. It's just one of those months that, like, the runners that I thought could offer more just don't. And I don't adapt to it. I don't change to it. I don't maybe recognize that, hey, this is holding pretty well and cover it earlier, like right here. But it is what it is. I get short again at dead lows. I'm risking highs, which again, terrible risk reward. And I realize I'm just all out of whack with this thing. I'm on tilt. And so when this pulls, I just cover it for a small gain and just move on, which I'm glad I did because it just was more choppy further on along. Finally, though, it did pull. And what's even more annoying is that I knew their deadline to be compliant and file whatever filings they had to file was coming. Except I also knew that was the inefficiency of like, why is it bullish? Why is the stock going up that they are reaching their deadline, right? Like a good company should file well in advance. Like why is it that the fact that they are, a late student, so to speak, like everyone know, maybe you were one of them in high school, because I know I was at times, the kid who did the work at the very last minute, right? Why is that now bullish or rewarded from a stock's price perspective? And so I knew when it gapped up, I wanted to maybe think like, hey, this is going to be like a sell and news event. And again, did I short it? No, I didn't even. I was like brain dead. I don't know if that day I just wasn't watching it, but I just completely threw this thesis out the door. And what do you know? It actually was perfect. But again, I don't know if I just tainted myself or scarred myself from here, but I just totally wrote this thesis off. And it turns out it was spot on, right? So another missed trade there that just added to insult to injury. And so that's that. Now, this is where some bigger gains come in. Woke. Woke was a huge gap in crap that faded far beyond what I thought was even possible. And it's actually funny because you look at the chart, there's no real signs of this being a liquidation play. Now, I know it was a recent IPO. It's China, so sure there was those early signs, but I remember being short this in a webinar, and one of the guys in Clover asks, he's like, "Hey, are you worried this is like China?" And I go, "Well, not necessarily. Like I didn't see enough signs to like be worried that this was going to be some crazy squeeze or a liquidation play." And as time goes on, and as we're getting absolutely obliterated, I go, "Wait a minute, was this one that I just was ignorant about, and it worked in my favor this time?" And I think it was. And so as much as I'm happy that I made money on it, it's also one like, ooh, I should have maybe been more aware of this one if I could have been. Because yeah, I'm getting short. Kind of a bad chase, like it usually is for me. But held it till the end of the day there for like a 70% winner. Made like 18K on this one. So huge fader. So, and then I guess that's all I have to say about Woke. But what led to the next time or the next week was MGOL, because MGOL in after hours was gapping up huge by Friday, right? And so I already knew it was going to be a gapper coming to Monday. Yeah, this move right here. Okay. And so I actually shared my thoughts on this on Twitter. I shared it after the fact, but I put it in the room in real time. I just said, hey, like it does not shock me one bit that MGOL, which is like one of the more manipulated, squeezy tickers and China liquidation plays that we know exists, in the last 2 or 3 years, it doesn't shock me one bit that that's the very next runner after WOK. Like the funny meme from Incredibles, like coincidence? I think not. Like it seems too aligned to me. I can't prove that, but that's just where my brain immediately went. So I did a great job of not touching this at all today. Like didn't even want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Wasn't even thinking about it. So that was the good part. The better part, but also still the theme of the month of me being just overly greedy, is I did get short the second day. It worked beautifully. Amazing fade. And again, very similar to SMCI. What am I doing not covering a single share sub 5? Like, oh my God. Like, it's just crazy when I look in hindsight of like, what am I doing? And again, and I say hindsight as not in a sense of like, I just wasn't planning on covering at all. Again, similar to all the previous trades, I had trade plans of like, yeah, this is my price target. I thought this should do minimum sub 5, maybe even sub 4. But again, sub 5 is the minimum. So if it gets sub 5, I should be covering. Why am I not doing that? Again, I can only chalk it up to greed. I just in the moment and in the euphoria of being right so quickly, so early, I'm just like, yeah, like let's go lower. It's like this like lizard brain. I don't know I know what you call it. Like, I don't want to call it like a brain fart, but just like all month long, I was just almost asleep at the wheel of being proactive about covers. And so it turned into, let's call it full-size greed at the lows, not covering a thing, to then this spike that I didn't expect happening, and I'm covering practically dead top. Yeah, literally giving back almost 80% of my gains, being up well over 15, 20K, to then only being up a few grand, so I cover, and then I realize my mistake, so I reshort. But then at this point, I'm all tilted, so I covered again, only to know that you just got to be a couple hours more patient, and you would have gone right back down to where the morning lows were practically. So, I did make, what did I make here? I made like 4,500, like awesome. It's a green trade, but like, Jesus Christ, Kyle, like, pardon my French, but holy shit, cover some next time, So that's that. Another one that I missed was ATCH. This was, again, arguably, I would think this would have contributed to one of these days actually, I think it was Monday, to one of my better days of the month, if not the best. I don't think it would have beaten the third because of TNXP, but another gap and crap that I would have nailed. And again, asleep at the wheel. Like I remember saying, I'm going to get short. And then I just don't. I don't. It was somewhere in here where I was waiting for a lower low and I had a good uptrend here, so didn't get short. Another good uptrend here, so didn't get short. And then this rollover was really the first time. You can almost draw a trend line, right? It's not that smooth, but you clearly see a small one here and then another one here. And it finally rolled over. And I remember saying to myself, like, hey, if you're going to get short, this is it. And I just don't. And, let's hypothetically say like an 11 short. I mean, it closes at 550, a full 50%. I mean, this would have been easily another 15 to 20K winner. And I just didn't. and one area where I will admit, and I'll give myself some slack here, is that on Monday and going into this week, a lot was happening in my life moving wise, right? There's nothing bad. They're all good things. But if anyone's moved or has, dealt with, going into a new place, not to get too over off topic here, but I'm like pool service, maid service, gardening, contractor, foundation, electrical. Like I was making these, I mean, maybe that's what it was, where I was at sleep at the wheel, because I didn't have, it was like so much more of my decision-making stamina was being used on outside of trading things, like throughout this entire really month. I mean, I was making phone calls every single day to someone to get my life sorted out for this move. And I certainly was making those phone calls on Monday during this period. And so, if I want to psychoanalyze myself, I think that would be the biggest factor, besides being greedy, like what I've mentioned numerous times. It might have just been I just didn't have the stamina to make the correct decisions, because I was doing so much of my energy was being spent on outside things. Let's call it that. I don't think that's an excuse, because again, I've dealt with many other life things that aren't necessarily positive, that take a lot of my energy, and still trade just fine because I'm able to kind of zone out and just focus on the task at hand, which is trading. But again, if I'm psychoanalyzing myself as I'm making this video and reflecting, that's a factor that I think did play a role, even whether I'm aware of it or not. So yeah, missed that one. Huge miss there. And then to add icing on the cake, like I said, great job avoiding it. Not so great job nailing it here. And then lo and behold, I'm thinking to myself, hey, let's get short for like a swing. Again, maybe the promoters or the manipulators, whoever's behind MGLO most of the time, the algo, once it's done, beautiful fade. Once it's done, beautiful fade. And so I'm thinking to myself, hey, let's get a fade here. And of course, it chops just enough to have me lose hope and, of course, stop me out. I got short somewhere into the bounce day. All right, if we go to the charts here. Oh, God, I don't even remember this one. This was bad. Just T-wapping all over the place. But getting short and then, again, like I said, swinging. And then, on this day right here, breaking over these highs, these 5 highs, cover it. And then even then, I try reshorting it, on like a low a day crack. And by after hours, it's uptrending again. I said, it's like I'm tilted at this point. I've just lost more than I really even want to on a ticker that I almost knew that, like, when I took the short, I was like, of course this is gonna, and this was pre-sight. This was in hindsight. I'm like, what are the odds that I take this and this is the one time it doesn't fade beautifully backside, that it gives you just enough headache to stop me out? And of course, I told my own future and just said, screw this, like I'm blacklisting this thing. And I haven't even looked at it since now. So of course the next day, it chopped around, but it is technically where it was. But it's screw this ticker, right? Like I literally will. After this video, I will not ever look at it again. I just don't care. It's not worth my energy. And then, however, the last trade here was on Mullen. Mullen was a good one because, well, another trade I missed was they did a reverse split. And I didn't expect this big of a fade, but I did think, like, hey, after reverse split, it wouldn't be a bad idea to get short. My goodness, was it a good short? From 10 to 2 in like 5 days, a full 80%. You couldn't have asked for an easier swing, right? And so a bit unfortunate I missed that one, but then it did gap up, and so I thought to myself, hey, this is probably my second chance to capture something. And so I did get short. Initially, was at what I thought was a lower low. Actually ricocheted a little bit, but then finally died, and then it kind of T-WAP'd. I don't know why I T-WAP'd on MGOL or MLGO in this one. I just decided to. Didn't really know what good price to get, but I thought if I just T-WAP it over a certain period of time, I'll get what I think. Obviously not the case. It ends up being much higher for longer up here, but did then hold it overnight. Normally I'm covering. I would have been covering it here if it was an average gap and crap, but because I thought Mullen should, fade like it has been, ended up being the right decision because it held it, swung it for a couple days, and on Friday, which was yesterday, down to the 250s, to mid twos, and so I cover the rest there for a 14K gain. Could argue, Kyle, why don't you want to keep swinging? Like it's, there will of course be bounces along the way, but I think it's pretty clear what this company does, and it's dilute, reverse split, dilute. So yeah, in 3 months from now, I'm sure this is back down sub $1. But, after being so greedy all of this month, I thought to myself, no, let's lock something in. Let's stop looking for lower and hoping for lower and planning for lower. Like, let's just take some damn profits for once. So lock that in. Gave me a better close to the end of the month, unlike what MGOL did for me, or MLGO, did for me on Thursday. And then, like I said, closing out the month, just under 100K. So, again, real world money, very grateful. I would love to make 100K for the rest of every month for the rest of my life. I'll be more than happy and satisfied financially. But again, part of being a good trader is separating that and looking at where we've done wrong. And from this video, I hope you guys can tell, like, there's plenty of things I did wrong in terms of the greed and just, like I said, maybe decision stamina overload, right? I couldn't stick with making the correct decisions. And because of missing some of those healthy 5-figure gains, I think that was a big contributor of this risk reward just being pretty subpar, right? I can be profitable on 1-to-1, clearly with a win rate that is usually over 50%, but that's not the efficiency I really want, right? That doesn't give me a good comfortability that, like, hey, my edge is strong, and I know it is strong over the long run, but when I have months like this, it's like, I'm really not that far away from giving that back, given this was a little bit worse than it should have been. So, but again, thankfully, it really was only that really bad loser that was that one off. Every other loser I took was around the range that I was accepting. Maybe it was annoying, like I said, giving back more than I wanted to, but if you've been following my videos, I have been progressively working on sizing up, and so naturally, losing 10K is not. I mean, that's almost expected at this point. Like, if I'm wrong, that's really what I'm going to lose. So, going into March, as much as I don't love the mistakes I made here, at the end of the day, I didn't get stubborn or anything. I cut all my losses where they were supposed to be. I accepted all the losses as they came, and so I have, and I'm prepared to size up another inch forward going into March. So we're going to keep pushing that progression, and yeah, like I said, this will officially be the last time you see this office. You'll get probably, I don't know if my background will be different. There certainly won't be a door here anymore. That's for sure. But anyways, guys, I'm rambling on enough. Hopefully you enjoyed the recap, and I will see you guys all at the end of March. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.